Here we are again. This is the Resilient Entrepreneur Podcast brought to you by Kevin Johnson of Leverage Consulting. So, the question I have for you today is, do you do numbers? And what I mean by that is, how often are you really looking at your numbers, your performance, your metrics, your performance indicators, whatever it is that you call them? How often are you looking at them? And interestingly enough, there's a lot of clients that I worked with over the years where we get too busy to look at numbers. Maybe it's not the fun thing to do. Sometimes we don't even really know what numbers should I be looking at. And even if I do look at them, what are they supposed to be telling me? What am I supposed to get from it? So the other piece of this is that many times people are gauging their business performance off of how they feel. And crazy enough, those two things really don't oftentimes go together. So how you feel and the actual business performance are not always the same. You may think, for example, if you had a retail shop and, leading up to Christmas and during the Christmas shopping season, you would think, okay, that if of all times, that has to be the most stressful time of the year. So you would kind of equate the fact that, okay, if my stress level goes up, then the income level must be going up as well. And it's not the case. The thing that makes me smile the most is when I've had clients who will call me out of the blue and they will say, I'm very upset right now. My practice is not doing well. It's circling the drain. It's going down the tubes. Whatever their way of describing it was, and then we'll sit back and we'll look at the numbers. And for some of them, many of them, the numbers have gone up. I mean, it's been interesting where a lot of clients have over time, they're used to equating the business performance to their stress level. So therefore, if I'm stressed out, I must be making a lot of money. And, for my motto or my goal for every client is more money and less stress. So when they call and their numbers are up by 20%, but they're feeling like their practice is not doing well, that tells me things are working because their numbers are up, say 20%, and their stress level has gone down significantly. So when you really look at, and one of the things I wanted to draw a correlation to, because I'm going through this with many of my clients, have been going through this really since last year, is doing comparisons of 2019, 2020, and 2021, and really taking a deep dive look at the performance of their business, their practice, because those 3 years are not the same. And you really do need to take a look at, so 2019, for a lot of people, they did very well. And, 2020, it's the performance really is all over the board. Some did very well. Some had an off year, we'll just say. And, I know there are businesses, we all know businesses that they just didn't make it. And some of it was because of the industry they're in. Some of it was because, outlying factors with COVID and what went on with that. So when we compare those 3 years, we can use 2019 as kind of like a benchmark, if you will, something that we know it was a constant. It didn't have a lot of weird outside influences unless you personally had things going on where, maybe somehow, way, shape, or form, business-wise, personally, there was something that went on that threw 2019 off. But for many, 2019 is something that we can go back to and say, this is kind of a good year to compare against. For 2020, there were a lot of people, as I said, who actually did really well. I knew some that actually were up 10%, even though they had to either close or seriously reduce the capacity of their business or practice. And really in 2021, we don't have a full year to compare against, so you have to go back and compare the year-to-date numbers, depending on when you decide to do this. But first off, we would do a year-to-date look over those 3 years. Second, we'd also look at 2020 for many, we had reduced capacity. So we may not have been able to see as many clients, customers, patients, and we just had a diminished capacity, and because it was more protocols, more things that we had to do the same job we would have done in 2019. So we have to take that into account. And for some of my clients, I'd say it would have been, for those who had to actually shut down, I'd say on average it was about 6 weeks. And then for others, after the shutdown period, then we got back to work, and the capacity may have been 60% of what it would have been. So let's just say if a practice went back to work in June of 2020, they may have only been able to see 60% of the patients that they would have seen in June of 2019. So we can take into account some of those things. And again, what we're trying to do is just figure out, how's our performance doing from one year to the next? And even in 2021, we might leapfrog 2020 just to go back and look at 2019. And how does that compare to a year where we didn't have any weird outside influences going on that affects our business? And, the other, as we're doing this, we'll look at the production per day. That's another thing, because in 2019, 2020, and 2021, we already know 2020, pretty much everyone had fewer days worked. 2019, again, for your individual business or practice, it may have been a year where you worked a ton of days. 2021, who knows? Maybe, again, you may have been one that's doing very well. You may have been very stressed out because of 2020, 2020. Maybe you took more family time. There's a couple clients of mine who, for various reasons, have taken a lot more vacation days this year, partly because of the stress of what went on last year, partly because last year also made them realize that life is short and they need to spend time with their family. I mean, one of them, their kids are going to college. They want to spend more time with their kids shortly before they go off to college. Another realizes that their kids are in their early teen years, and they know that they've only got about 5 years left, and their kids are going to college, and they want to start making memories with their kids before it's too late. And that really gets us to, with looking at all these days, because even as I'm talking about some of this, you might think, oh my God, I don't want to do this. But let me tell you something. These things, just walking through, it's not a complicated process, but walking through this process and figuring out what is the best use of my time and what's going to make me happy at the end of the year, or when I do a look back a year or two from now. Am I going to be happy with what I did? So all of this is really about being deliberate with your own time to be as absolutely productive as humanly possible, but also make sure that we're taking care of number one. And if you haven't been told lately, you're number one. You're number one in your own world, because no one is going to take care of you any better than you will take care of yourself. End of story. So you really do need to work on being very deliberate with the time that you invest with your practice. One, to be as productive as humanly possible. And secondly, to make sure that you take care of yourself. And whether that is exercise, vacation, spending time with your friends and family, hobbies, and you've probably heard me say this before. I'm a huge believer in everyone having some kind of hobby, basically something that recharges your batteries. I can go fly fishing and spend an entire day on the river, and it's like I've literally been plugged into the wall all day. My batteries are probably at 110% because I got to do something that I love to do all day. That recharges my batteries. When I work out, I always feel better. So all of this is about looking at the numbers and figuring out how to maximize your own productivity and time, but also make sure that you have time to invest in yourself and recharge your own batteries. So hopefully this ended in a way that kind of excites you and motivates you to go back and look at those numbers. And with that said, and as always, If you have questions, comments, thoughts, or anything that you'd love for me to cover in a future podcast, please feel free to reach out, send me a direct message, drop it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. That was your Resilient Entrepreneur podcast for the day. And stay tuned because I've got about 4 or 5 others queued up here that I believe there are going to be some things that'll hit home for you just like this one did.